Did you hear any stories about people of colour growing up?
Yes, we experienced a few. At one point my mother ran a bed and breakfast house in Dovercourt, my parents, and the one thing that they refused to have was this famous sign that went around, which was no blacks, no Irish, no dogs. And that was, when I read that, I just said to Mum, why? We love dogs. We've got family in Ireland. And I've never seen a black man, but he's a man, so what's the difference? So Mum said, well, some people think they shouldn't be with us. But they live in our world. And I'm only a 8-year-old. They live in our world. Years back we'd done a strange sort of disco. The grown-ups had organised a party where you have tramps and you have ladies, and the tramps were all sooted up, and they went one further and turned them into gollywogs. And I walked out. I was 6 years old. I refused to go. But you're insulting them. No, it's their toys. No, it's not right. And I was 6 and saying, it's not right. This shouldn't be happening. Mum and Dad had always brought us up to believe that every human is worth respect. But as to exposure to a multicultural environment, I didn't have any of it. We moved into a house that my parents had bought that had been previously rented by the room to a family in each room. I believe from India. One bathroom and about 5 families. And that's why Mum and Dad got the house absolutely for nothing, for very little. What happened to the families, I never met them. I never even heard stories about them. I knew they had children. I found out that they'd got a lot of children because they didn't know the toilet system. Nobody taught them. They use a different system over there, so fair enough. You use what you know. Unfortunately, we were sitting in one room. Dad had already knocked the wall down to open up the kitchen and the lounge together, had got props in. We were all sitting watching Doctor Who on a Saturday night. Mum had just finished the washing up when the toilet came through the ceiling because the wood had been so rotten from having so many families use it. And that got me thinking as a child, so why did nobody teach them how to use it? Ignorance. And that's what I've come across all my life. It's just ignorance. People don't know, so they judge.
When you met your beloved, what was that like?
Lust at first sight. Both of us, unfortunately. And it turned quickly into love.
Why did you choose him?
He spoke so eloquently. And he had such a smile on him and a way with him. He treated me with such respect. I didn't owe the man anything, and he didn't owe me anything. But he treated me like a queen. He didn't say I was stupid. He asked me questions about me, about history, about my art. We would go around some museums every now and then, and he'd ask me to explain a painting to him, or about the history of the royal family, or the lords and the ladies. And I said, well, they're a stack of crooks actually, they're worse than the Krays. Our British history is built on crime. Those who were the biggest crime lords got to be the lords and the ladies, the royal family. Our royal family now, the youngest ones, have a totally different perspective. They respect humanity and the world and the environment. But you go 4 or 5 generations back, it was a different world. A human or a serf was worth nothing. And I explained this to him, and I showed him in the history books.
You had a connection that there was that you basically experiencing, kind of in some shape or form you were experiencing similar kind of feelings of feeling less than.
Well, we'd seen that in the past, people of every genre, of every country, were treated like shit. He had a very good phrase, which I found out later was quite common. But I'd never heard it before. Don't piss in my pocket and call it rain. And it's true. So many people had tried to smooth, how can I say, if they tell something, they tell it so that they think people will believe them. It might be based on a grain of truth, but there's a whole web of lies around it. And that is what has happened to history. There'll be a grain of truth and a whole web of lies around it. And that's what's happened to the history of every country you come across. To the victor goes history.
Can you imagine what it might have been like for you had you had that relationship maybe 20 years previous, maybe 20, 30 years?
Probably a lot worse. When my mother ran the bed and breakfast house as a kid, before my father passed away, we threw that sign out. It was left for us by a committee in Dovercourt of various bed and breakfast house owners. So we were past this sign. My father took it out and ripped it up in front of them.
Can you explain what that sign is again?
No blacks, no Irish, no dogs. And I have always found that to be the most offensive, not just to those quoted on the board, but to ourselves. How could we dare to do something so cruel? We bring them over on the Windrush and treat them like dirt? This is just not right. We had people here before. Oh, I was getting so het up, even as a child. A lot of my mum's friends were Chinese. A lot of my father's friends were Italian, and anybody who worked on the docks or worked in fairgrounds. So they told us stories of nights out, adventures that other people had had. My father rarely spoke about the end of the war, but he did speak about when he met Mum, and that was in a fairground, and my mum was at the top of this unit, this display thing, and he was riding the wall of death, going round and round, and he was trying to go round faster to make her skirt float up.
So can I ask, can you relate the most difficult period of your relationship and then the most joyful?
His 50th, when he asked me to marry him. And we had people from every walk of life, every skin tone. We had Oriental, Caribbean. We had folk from the islands, we had folk from the mainland, from almost every continent. And that was the best party, because he swung me around. He'd got everybody to stand clear in the middle of the lounge, swung me around, sat me down on this old chair, big old wicker chair thing with a back to it that had to be seen to be believed, and asked me to marry him. And I just went, yes. Tiny little voice suddenly came out, and we danced and danced until our feet were not working.
What was the most painful?
When I realised the loneliness he felt when he was out with me and my family and friends. We came up to Colchester to a party, and he was the only black man there, the only man of colour. And he stayed in the cosy place, in the cosy area next to me. And I suddenly realised that he must feel so alone. He was actually quite scared. This beautiful, big, 6'4", built like a brick wall, who loved me to bits, and he felt small. And I said, no, you're not going to be like this. You have every right to be here. You have every right to interact with everyone. He said, I'm not going to that top back bedroom. I said, why? I said, all the gays have claimed that room. I said, they're not going to rape you. You're going to be fine. Shake their hands. They're clean. They're human beings. He said, yes, but the nice room's next door. I said, what one's that? He said, well, the lesbians are in that one. Can I go up and say I'm a lesbian in disguise, please? I said, no, you can't. Sit down. But
Did you understand? Did you understand why he felt that way about the same?
He felt alone because he didn't want pity. That's the one thing he hated in life, was pity. He could understand if I understood things, like when he would blank out. He'd be back on manoeuvres suddenly. He'd wake up and his eyes would be wide open, and you'd think he'd be awake and interacting, but he's not. He's going through issues with his past, and he'll get up, start naked, and he'll start walking out the front door, but he's marching because he's standing as if he's got guns and a helmet on and fatigues on. So, and I would have to very carefully move him back inside, because if you tapped him on the back wrong, he would react and you would be flat out on the floor. He wouldn't see a person, he would see somebody attacking him. So,
because if you were struggling with something like some kind of PTSD or something.
Yeah, he'd been on clean-up duty on the Falklands, for instance, and that's not using a broomstick. You're picking up bits of bodies and trying to match them up. So that in itself was a harrowing experience. He'd been in Northern Ireland during the Troubles. I think that's when he got shot through. He'd lost his best friend in the army in Northern Ireland. And even though he was from Barbados, that was his first experience of marijuana. Because his best friend had been killed off a signal tower, and he was marching back to the biggest town he could find with a loaded gun. His sergeant found him and stuffed a joint in his mouth and made him sit on the back of the lorry. Thank goodness for that, because he was in a red rage, so I'm told by others.
How do you feel about, when he's recounting these memories to you? How did you look at him? What were your thoughts?
My thoughts was, no human who has such a beautiful, kind heart should ever have to go through that. We disagreed on religion, but we respected each other's opinions. I believe in an energy of the universe, atoms. I believe in science. But he'd been raised to be a preacher in the Church of Nazarene, and I respected that. People around us thought he was a shaman because he had this gigantic walking stick carved that I'd got him when we went on holiday to Cornwall. He liked to investigate history.
Did he find out enough about his people, about who he was and his history? Can you imagine if, like today, there's a discussion about slavery? You know, for the first time they're having these conversations. Would you, in your mind, how do you feel he would think about that?
He would love it.
If he could ever just find out.
Oh yes, he would be. It wasn't purely this human being that he was interested in. He was interested in what human beings had created. Their songs, their music, their crafts, their communication. It's okay. That's the garage across the road. Let that log in. Oh, everything's fine.
He was interested in human beings, you said.
Yes, in human beings. Not just... He was part Arawak, which was from the Caribbean islands. He was part German. He was in his own right multicultural. There were no living original races of the islands or of Barbados. They'd all been bred out. So he wanted to know what their history was because they were part of him.
Mm.
He was ashamed at one point when he found out that he was part German. I said they weren't always Nazis. They were a very proud race, but they were also marvellous inventors. They were artists of repute, musicians. I said, you know this about German history. What do you know about your own? About the other lineages that you come from? I mean, my lineage comes from Norway. Cottrell is cat's tail, which is a piece of land up north in Scandinavia and Norway. So we're there. But we also went on to America. And it turns out we were outlaws. And at one point we were also slaveholders. When I found out we were owners, I had this wave of sheer guilt that came across me. And he reassured me. He said, just as you said to me, Germans aren't all Nazis. Not all of you were that way inclined. We can believe you were one of the kinder ones. We can believe that you were, perhaps your family, were helping with the Underground Railroad. You don't know this. You know your second husband, their family, were with the Jewish Underground Railroad. They used to send people in and out with the farming animals, with the cows. There were more feet than there were hooves that went in and out at milking. And they'd got 4 Germans billeted in the house. So every piece of history counts. Every lineage counts. And he felt reassured by this.
Did he ever talk to you about racism? Did he ever at all?
He tried to. But
What kind of things did he say?
his own battle with racism was pick a fight. He hated the National Front. But he was best friends with some of the people in the top part of the National Front. They respected him.
How did it happen? How did he find himself in that kind of situation where he's got friends who are in the National Front?
He rescued them.
What do you mean in the army?
No, this was in life. I'm not sure when it was. But I'm told that one particular member of the National Front was being picked on by 5 or 6 other members of another part of the group, and Steve was walking past and waded in. Just one person, 6 people, not on, and went on with it.
Did he know that the person was?
Had no idea.
But he was just from human instinct.
Yeah, human instinct. Somebody was in trouble, so he waded in. That was him. That's what he would do, and I'm glad to say my son's the same.
So that built a relationship with those people from the National Front.
Yeah.
And so he was at odds at this point.
Hands off him. He does not touch. He does not get touched. So the National Front left him alone. But he didn't do it for that. And so every now and then they would get together and talk.
Did that help the other person understand a bit more about?
I think so. That particular person is now, a few years back now, has moved away from the National Front. Has come away more in. He literally unbrainwashed himself. So he now accepts that people of every ilk, every colour, are entitled to be treated with respect, are entitled to human civility.